How you all doing? Doing good? Awesome. Alrighty, so in 1969, I was 6 years old. Now all the college kids are like, oh, wow, how old is he now? And it's like, I'll let you know, it's over 32. I'll just stop right there. So when I was 6 years old, my family moved into a house. It was a typical 1950s suburban house, and cookie cutter, and everything was perfect. And my parents kind of saw, oh, this is going to be such a typical 50s dream. So I moved in there at 6 years old. Things were kind of cool. And lo and behold, next day I realized that our immediate neighbors was a hippie family. And it blew my mind. And it was amazing because this hippie family was totally changing all the norms that I grew up as a 6-year-old little kid. This family, I honestly believe the house had no windows, no doors. They basically were dancing day and night. Things flowed in, people flowed out. People were sleeping on the lawn. They were sleeping on the roof. They were sleeping on my roof. It was amazing. And the hippies were just such a huge shock for me. By 1972, they went away. And what was interesting for me is that ever since then, I had this like, where did the hippies go? So life is going on, and I'm doing my kind of research. And about like 10 years ago, someone was talking about like hippie towns. And I was like, hippie towns? There's hippies in towns? It's like, so this is something I got to look into. So my talk deals with hippies. So many of you may not even know what a hippie is. The hippies was part of the 1960s countercultural revolution. And it was an opportunity for all of us in the 60s to really self-reflect and kind of step out and think about what's wrong with the world, what's right with the world, and how I connect to this. It was a huge fight according to the suburban dream that was being fed to us. This kind of capitalistic, corporate, everyone fits in the same box. And the counterculture was all about me. What am I all about, right? How am I connecting to really important things in the world? And so how do I create community? So what happened was, after about the 1969, 1970s, the hippies kind of started fading away. Many of them went off grid. Some created these really cool urban kind of like enclaves. And then where my research came in was hippie towns. That throughout the United States, and in fact the world, there are hippie towns where they were entire communities taken over by hippies in the 1960s and still exist today, which is like an amazingly cool thing. It's like, whoa. So my research was started about 8 years ago. I started researching hippie towns. Started off with 105, got it all down to about 10. And so for the past 6 to 7 years, I've been going around the country analyzing hippie towns. So I do research on city planning. And so I'm interested in terms of like, how do these hippie towns kind of work? So according to my research, I kind of looked at a bunch of key variables. And so like one of them was controlling population. And it was amazing. So in my research, I looked at hippie towns in comparison to non-hippie towns and was realizing that hippie towns are doing a great job in terms of creating community by shrinking the picture. And so you notice here, by about the 1980s, hippie town population growth really shrunk. The other thing which was amazing about this research was that not only are hippie communities in terms of these hippie towns able to control their population, they're also doing a really good job in terms of making sure their community has this kind of more equitable understanding. And so they were really starting to knock out the park. Unemployment was dramatically dropping in hippie towns in comparison to their non-hippie peers. Lastly, which was so fascinating about this research, is that everybody kind of thought hippies were all anti the economics and stuff like that. In hippie towns, hippie communities created their own idea of organic economics. And what was fascinating about it, they made economics work for them. And so looking at hippie towns, many hippie towns' median income far surpass non-hippie towns. So this is a classic example in Manitou Springs where you have median income over $18,000 higher in a hippie town than a non-hippie town. And so what was amazing about all this research, and so I'm like, yeah, this is great. And so many of you, for students, professors, especially if they do a lot of research, we get our happy dance. And I was just getting all jiggy about my data. It was just awesome. It's doing everything I wanted to do, but then I'm doing my happy dance, and all of a sudden, it was like this whoa moment. And the whoa moment was, it's not about this data. The hippies and all the hippie people I saw and all the people I talked to, they were telling me there's something more important. And what they were telling me was, we're changing the world. The hippies were right, and they were living it, and they were changing the world. And so what this talk is about is what I learned from the hippies all over the United States, is how do you change the world? Well, the first step in terms of changing the world in hippie communities is something known as what I call mindful passion. In hippie parlance, this is what we call getting one with your freak flag. In terms of the counterculture, it was all about being in tune to what you are passionate about and making those connections to world events. And so you saw this in the 1960s with incredible connections to real, amazing world events. The War of Vietnam, equal rights. And we see this in all the hippie towns. The compassion in terms of getting their freak flag out there and let everybody understand that we can do something about it and make a stand on it. Believe in things. Be out there on that. Second is that we have action planning. I love this. Has anybody played shuffleboard? Shuffleboard is a linear process. This is a classic example of action planning. This is in Bisbee, Arizona. They wanted to plant a tree. Who needs shuffleboards, right? So action planning in these hippie towns was planning backwards. As a planning professor, I teach all my students, you plan and then do action. In hippie towns, they flipped it. It's all about the action, and let's plan for that action. And that was very, very clearly seen in the 1960s. The 1960s was all about a counterculture to change the world. And we see this in our hippie towns, where they consciously got in touch with each other to passionately make great change. Third, it's about being inclusive community. It's all about the we, right? We are all in this together. And we see this in the 1960s, where it was, we were all part of one tribe, one community. And we see this in all the hippie towns. Not only are we local, not only are we organic, but we're loved, you know? And isn't that a crazy concept? We could be loved in our community. And we're rooted in our community. We all belong. Fourth, live it. What was amazing about these hippie towns and the people living in these hippie towns is they put their lives on the line. They lived what they believed, and they stuck to it for over 60 years. And so they flew their freak flag. They made it front and center in their communities. And they really lived with the idea that we can actually be part of a solution. And that they were not afraid to fly their freak flag. Be yourself. Be real. And redefine what we do. So this is an attorney's office. Imagine, and no disrespect to attorneys, having an attorney who's an advocate for you. What a concept, right? And so they stitched everything they believed in, even to the smallest things of socks. Even making socks can change the world. And so what was amazing about my hippie town research is that we come to this kind of really powerful position in terms of we can change the community and the world carefully. So I close with this. So you all may not know it, but you all have a freak flag. And you probably know where that freak flag is, right? So I want to just nudge you, just a little bit. Find your freak flag. Get in touch with your freak flag. And make some friends and change the world one community at a time. Thank you.